It's a new year again, and it's that time of year when economists start making predictions about where the world's going, businesses are drawing up their plans, and the world's elite gather in Davos to talk about income inequality, war, economic outlooks, all the big burning issues of the day. We at the FT will be covering it, and I'm joined now by Chris Giles and Gideon Rachman to talk about some of the big issues we're going to be watching over the next week. So, Chris, people are gathering at a time when there's a lot of warnings from people like Christine Lagarde from the IMF and others that the outlook is not quite as robust for global growth as we thought, say, 6 months ago. Are you expecting the economists to be upbeat or downbeat?
I think they're going to be downbeat. I think, they all produced forecasts, as you said, at the end of last year for 2016, and the beginning of this year has been just terrible for those forecasts already. Financial markets have crashed, and so there's going to be quite a lot of shock there. Interestingly, on the day before the meeting starts, China will produce its growth figures for the final quarter of last year. Now, we can expect those to be good, so there'll be an interesting tension between all the market reasons, which will make people think there's a lot to worry about, and I think there will be quite a gloomy mood. People thinking that it might be the third leg, China might be the third leg of the global financial crisis. And against that, some better figures. So it's going to be quite an interesting tension between those two. So that's going to be the really big overriding economic theme. Along with, there's going to be a lot of talk about robots and migrants. And the question is, are either of these two things going to steal our jobs?
Interesting. I mean, the robots issue is certainly an area where the World Economic Forum is trying to get into new territory. They're trying to capture the zeitgeist. I notice there's very little discussion about banks this year, a lot more about technology. But what about the wider geopolitical landscape, Gideon? Because obviously we are meeting at a time of rising tension. The Middle East is one area where you're seeing a lot of problems right now. You've got the Russia and Crimea problems. You've got inside Europe migration flows. Interesting that migration was the biggest worry cited in the WEF survey before Davos amongst the elites about what they're worrying about right now. And of course, you've got the South China Sea. Are you expecting to see anything tangible to come out of this meeting in terms of dealing with these problems?
To be honest, no, but I think it will be very interesting in terms of mood. I mean, all those issues that you identify have collectively, I think, sort of challenged what used to be the central Davos proposition, which was that for all the differences in the world between very different political systems and ideologies, they could all arrive in Davos and you would have this interesting spectacle of the leaders of China, Russia, and the US, all being interested in pursuing the same globalization-driven vision. And the feeling was that maybe that was more powerful than the political differences that divided them. I think since then we've had the financial crisis, first of all, which creates a shock in the belief that globalization doesn't work so well, but then the turmoil in the Middle East that breaks out in 2011, and then Russia's occupation of Crimea in 2014. And those three things have collectively, I think, sort of shattered the view that, well, maybe economics and capitalism was powerful enough to create common ground between all these countries. And now you're seeing a new focus, but really a kind of confused focus on the old problems, division between big powers, turmoil in regions like the Middle East. There'll be a lot of discussion of that, but I'm not sure any real clear vision or way through.
Well, we do have quite a large contingent from America coming this year. Joe Biden, we've got John Kerry, we've got several others. What kind of a message do you think the Americans will be trying to deliver?
Well, I think that just the fact they're coming is significant. I mean, I think that the Americans have been very stung and are slightly defensive on the idea that the Obama administration has in some ways responsible for this outbreak of global anarchy because they haven't been sufficiently powerful, they haven't shown enough of a lead, that they've hesitated in the South China Sea or the Middle East. And I think they want to show that they are engaged and that they are tough. I think what's interesting, however, is that the counterparties aren't showing up. There's not very high-level Chinese delegation, there's not a high-level Russian delegation. So in some ways it leaves the Americans with a feel to themselves, but it's also this sense that things are so fractured now that Davos is no longer a place where they come together to try to thrash these things out.
I mean, I think interesting on the economics front, it'll be quite a different sort of America. It'll be an assertive America again, more like the 1990s America, saying, look, we've put up our interest rates only by 1/4 percentage point, but we've done that. We're on the road back to normality. You other countries, get your houses in order. That's going to be, we're beginning to see that from America. It's very different from the 2008, 2009, where America had to admit that maybe it got things wrong itself, we're going to see quite a robust America, I think.
Yeah.
And
Although
of course,
I think, just a footnote to that, I think there'll be a lot of interest from the outside world in responding to the Americans saying, well, you know, maybe things are fine, but then how do you explain Donald Trump? How do you explain Bernie Sanders? Everything's so great. Why is the US presidential election looking so weird?
and of course, one person who won't be there this time is Jeremy Corbyn or Trump or any of the other politicians creating these shockwaves. And of course, the other issue is migration, refugees. Lots and lots of discussion, I imagine, about the big challenges that's posing and how that's exacerbating both the economic pressures and, of course, some of the geopolitical tensions too. So certainly a very different Davos from the last few years. Thank you both very much indeed.